Struggling with ideas of what to feed your little one? Nourishing Their Lives is my baby and toddler recipe book with over 50 recipes to help your child thrive. Feeding your child can be one of the most stressful parts of parenting, so I've made it simple with tips and advice from a childhood dietitian, Courtney Bates, as well as simple recipes that your kids will love. Click the link in the show notes to grab your copy and use code LIFEPOD for an exclusive 15% off. Welcome to Life with Danny Duncan, where we talk about everything from nutrition, movement and mindset to the bullshit that's been holding you back to live your best life, completely raw and unfiltered. I'm your host, Danny Duncan. I'm a featured nutrition and fitness coach, author, business owner, speaker, mum of 3, including twins, and I'm going to let you into the behind the scenes of my life. Oh, and we'll have a bit of a laugh along the way, don't worry. It won't all be serious. I'm going to be the one to make you get uncomfortable with your reality and challenge you to make changes for good. So if you're feeling stuck in where you are in life and are ready to change, this podcast will unpack the reasons why you may be feeling this way and help you with tools to make changes in your life. There's no bullshit here, just real talk. So if you're ready, well, let's dive in. There's no time like the present. Hello and welcome back to Life with Danny Duncan. I am talking about a topic today that got me in hot water a few weeks ago, picky eaters. As a mother and nutrition coach, ensuring my kids eat a variety of foods and enjoy food is super important, as I know firsthand the importance of creating good eaters. I've written a baby and toddler recipe book with a childhood dietitian, and my aim of the book was to help parents navigate one of the most stressful times of parenthood, solids and eating. As my kids age and go through different stages, and I have more kids, as every kid is different, I've learned a lot about kids and food and found different ways to navigate different behaviours when it comes to what our kids eat. I pass on this regularly to my followers with what works for me and what doesn't, but I'm super proud of the consistency and time and effort that Chris and I have both put in to ensure our kids are the best possible eaters. We're not only creating a healthy relationship with food, but also instilling the knowledge in them as to why we eat so we can make informed choices later in life around their health and happiness. We have definitely had our challenges at times too. I mean, Harper is 5 and 5-year-olds can be very clear on what they want and don't want, but we've continued to stick to our beliefs and values around food. And we take full responsibility for what comes into our house and what we feed our kids. So that's what they know. We don't make multiple meals. Chris definitely refuses to make more than one meal. And if you don't eat what you're served in our house, then there's no other option. And they know that. Now, as my health journey has grown over the last few years and we no longer have ultra-processed snacks and meals in our house, the kids don't really know any different. And it's been a journey. So when I put up a reel the other week saying, unpopular opinion, you created your picky eater, I got a few people's feathers up. Now, I want to say that if you have a child that is neurodiverse, then this podcast just may not be for you. I acknowledge that having a child with ADHD, autism, or something else can be really hard to navigate when it comes to challenges around food. We may touch on this topic a little bit in this discussion, but this topic is probably saved for another podcast another day. Anyway, after that reel went crazy, I was tagged in a reel by Thalia Prum, who is a picky eater dietitian. She remixed my reel after one of her followers sent it to her, and I actually loved the way she talked about my reel and started scrolling her page and thought, yes, I need to talk to this girl. Thalia Prum is a picky eater dietitian, has a master's degree in clinical nutrition and dietetics. She's a mum of 2 girls and a retired diet guide dog. She used to love performing acrobatics, which I had to put in there because I thought that was super cool. And she focuses on why the child is having trouble eating and trying foods and takes a top-down approach with clients to work on mindset and ways to decrease food anxiety and increase food variety using play, fun, and no-pressure techniques to increase a child's confidence and confidence and support a respectful parent-child relationship. She believes every child deserves a healthy relationship with food and every parent is capable of giving this gift to their child, which is so in line with my beliefs, which is why I just had to have her on. So Thalia is going to unpack some of the truths about picky eating. We're going to discuss why and how we get picky eaters, what we can do about it, and you'll walk away hopefully with some awesome tools and tips to ensure you have the best possible eaters ever. So that's enough talking from me. Welcome, Thalia.
Thank you so much for having me, Danny. It's a pleasure.
You're so welcome. I'm really excited about this conversation, and I think it's going to help a lot of parents out there too.
Absolutely. And you said, hopefully you walk away with tools. You will walk away with tools.
Yes.
And if you don't walk away with tools, you can send me a message on Instagram and tell me that you've tried everything and that you need more help, and I will help you with that too.
Totally. I love it. Solutions focused. Now, I do ask every guest on my podcast a question. I haven't really prepped you on this one, so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. But what is your most cringe-worthy laugh out loud moment?
How dark do we want to get here?
We had it all.
Well, that is, okay, it is putting me on the spot, but I want to, when I was first learning to cook, And this is a little bit dark. I had just moved in with he was my boyfriend at the time, and he was my husband, and now he's my ex-husband. And I was learning how to cook, and I wanted to try cooking tofu. And this was sort of like, internet was around, but like you wouldn't just Google everything in the same way you would today. This was like 15, 16 years ago. And dating myself. And I didn't know that you had to press the tofu first. I had never really eaten it. I never cooked it. And I didn't press it. And I made this meal that was supposed to be like sauteed, like a fried rice type thing. And it was all like soggy and mushy, and it was not great. That was pretty cringe.
The worst is when you serve that to someone and they're like, oh.
I served it to my boyfriend at the time, and it did not go down well. No. One of the many red flags, because we should all be able to laugh at ourselves when we make a mistake. Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. I'll do it differently next time.
Totally. Oh, gosh. I'm sure you're very well aware of how to cook tofu now. I'm sure it's delicious when you cook it now.
Oh, yeah, it's nice and crispy now. One of the things that I really like about Instagram and TikTok Reels is that so many people share unusual recipes that you may not have ever thought. Like I came across a tofu mousse a few weeks ago that I made with my kids, which we've made in the past, but it was like I haven't made that in a while. I really like that one of the things that we can teach our kids, which definitely rolls nicely into our conversation, is that it's okay that things can have unusual ingredients in them. And that's actually a really cool thing.
Yeah, totally. We've had brownies made with black beans and beetroot, and yeah, there's always lots of different weird things in my food. So yeah, I love it. Cool. All right, so let's get into it. So my first question is, tell us a little bit about why you decided to go down this route of being a picky eater dietitian.
I don't want to say it just kind of happened. I will say it wasn't a plan. I'll try and do the shortest story as possible. In my undergrad, I took some time to study overseas because I was wanting to be with this man who was my husband, who is now not my husband. And I took this course that I really, really loved. I went home after the first day and I'm like, how do I study this forever? Like, one of the things that popped up was clinical nutrition and dietetics. And I'm like, okay, great. I fulfilled all the prerequisites to get into this program over the next 3 years. And I'm like, I have to apply to it. And at the time, my spouse wanted to move back to America and was like we had lots of arguments and fights as to whether or not I should do this course. And I said, look, I'm just going to apply to this one because I spent the last 3 years working towards getting into it. And I will regret this if I don't even apply. And I applied, and they don't accept a lot of people. So I was sort of expecting not to get in and be like, okay, now we can move. But I did get in, and I did the program, and it was a fabulous program. I've met like a lot of wonderful people, and I've learned so many things, and I really enjoyed it. And then I moved overseas to be with him, and there's no reciprocity agreement, so you can't work as a dietitian in the US if you're an Australian dietitian without going through like more training, and it's expensive and it's a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I ended up volunteering at a few different organizations, and then I got a job working as a community college adjunct professor, and I lectured and I taught online courses and in-person classes for advanced nutrition, regular nutrition, cultural nutrition, and sports nutrition, which was amazing. I had a bit of a negative experience there when I had my babies because they didn't like that I was going to take my parental leave. Yeah. And after my second baby came, I took some time off because it was not a great place to work because of that. And after 6 months, I was like, I'm really struggling in motherhood. I was pretty much doing most of the things solo, and I just completely lost who I was as a person. And I had a blog at the time, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll see how I can like maybe connect that blog onto Instagram and, see what I can do about it. And I came across this course that was about using Instagram as a business tool. And I took this course and I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. I never would have thought to do anything like businessy. And it had you walk through this workbook of like, who do you want to serve? Who do you want to help? And originally I was just kind of posting random stuff about like different food things that I found interesting. And as I was working through this program, I'm like, I really do want to serve mothers. There's so many questions pop up every time I share a picture of a plate. Oh, my child wouldn't eat that, or my kid would never touch tofu, or something like that. Yeah. And I kind of just whittled it down to, this is definitely the population I want to serve. And I was doing like live streams and answering questions in my stories, and it was getting a lot of engagement. And at the time I had 2 little kids, 6 months old and 2.5 years old. Yeah. I was not in a place where I could do any kind of face-to-face coaching. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll put together a little like mini online course. And that sold really, really well. So this was like 6 months into.
How long ago are we talking? Like, what year was this?
This was in 2019.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So pre-pandemic. And it was also when I hit about 10,000 followers on Instagram. And my ex-husband at the time had kind of said, oh, who's going to buy a course from you? Like, you know. So I made this course and it did sell. It was very small. It was like a 20-minute course. And like it sold really well. And I thought, you know what? There's actually so much more that goes into like actually helping parents with picky eaters. About a year later, this was during the pandemic, I redid the course and I padded it out not padded, but put a lot more tools in there, and it was much more in-depth given that people were clearly interested and struggling with this. And then during the pandemic was when my ex-husband got laid off, and I'm like, well, now you're home. Can you look after kids for a few hours, a few times a week so that I can see if I can get some clients?
Yeah.
And we did do that. And about 3 months into doing that, I was completely like booked on. I had a wait list of parents.
Yeah.
And like that took a little bit of time to kind of sort things out, but it just kind of steamrolled from there, where there was so much need, and it's a very charged space, like kind of like with your reel. When I decided to remix that, I was like, look, I'm pretty careful. I don't want ever to feel like someone is being called out or thrown under the bus, because we're all mothers. And for the most part, I do believe most parents are trying to do what they think is best.
Sure. Yeah. We do the best we can with what we know, and that's all we can do.
Exactly. That's kind of, I've had to do a lot of forgiving of myself for some of the choices that I made in my early adulthood, like winding up in a marriage that I did. Yeah. That, looking back was not a great idea. And in the same way, like I made the choices with what I knew at the time, and I just didn't know very much at the time. So if we can intercept parents really early on their journey, that's the best time where they have the knowledge and they can try something different. So I always try, I'm sure sometimes I come off a little bit like I am putting someone under the bus. It's definitely not intentional. I don't want any parent to feel like they're doing the wrong thing. There are just sometimes better ways of doing something that we just don't know.
Yeah. And you've probably seen from me, like I'm happy to make people feel uncomfortable, because I think it's a really important way sometimes, not all the time, to go, hang on, why? And people, this is why Instagram and social media is so hard. You've got different personalities. You're doing different people with different phases of life, what people are going through. So when they come across something, they might not be in a space that can take that, or they might be in a space where actually they feel like they can go, oh, this has made me feel uncomfortable. Why has it made me feel uncomfortable? Okay, maybe I need to change something up. But if people in social media, you can't always be you're not presenting to the same person, right? There's so much going on in parents' lives, and parents are, like we said, trying to do the best they can. We're juggling 5 million balls at the same time. And so when we ever get questioned about our parenting, it can be a sore point, right? Because you're going, hang on a second, I'm doing the best I can.
No one wants to be told they're doing something because they're afraid of something.
Totally.
But in reality, if we look at why do we pressure our children to eat, it's because we're afraid that if we don't, they won't eat.
Totally.
Or they won't eat vegetables. So we have to do it.
Yeah.
So there is this core fear behind why we do things, which is true in many areas of life.
Yeah.
But especially since we're talking about this, why are we doing that? And if we can just pause and take the time to reflect on why we're doing that,
totally,
it's going to be more helpful on our journey, because so much of parenting is reparenting ourselves and questioning why we're making some of the choices that we're making, and if it's helpful to make a change.
100%.
And I will say, like with my own kids, like one of them has seen an OT, and it was very interesting being on the other side of the client journey of actually being the client and rocking up and saying, like, please tell me, give me some new strategies for me to try. I'm open and I will try anything.
Totally. Yeah.
That's the place that it's really helpful to be at versus, I know I'm doing this the way I'm doing it and I want to do it this way and I'll do it this way and you can't tell me otherwise. Well, okay.
I have to say, some of my favorite messages are those ones as well. Like after that reel especially, there are some people on there, if you have a look at the comments, that are like, yeah, this made me feel uncomfortable, but actually I know, like you've just said to me, yeah, actually that's the reason. I've actually had people message me going, Danny, a few of your posts have made me feel really uncomfortable. And to be honest, at some point I've like sworn at you over Instagram, and like just coming back in to say that actually it's sunk in a little bit. And now when I reflect and go, well, actually I have brought that stuff into the house. Like I do that. I do make that second meal or whatever it is. And they go, I just wanted to say thank you, because I used to curse you, but now I realize that I had to feel uncomfortable. And so if we can get people to sort of go from that defensive place, which you're naturally going to be as a mother, right, to that space of being open to learn and change, because there's no book out of hospital, right? And if there was, it would be that fucking big that we would never get through it. And I think I am continually learning as well. Like Bo and Harper, so my oldest and then my boy twin, have been great eaters from day one. You know, would eat. And Harlow, I was like, oh my God. I was like, I can't have a picky eater. Like, not me, you know what I mean? Like, but, you know, she's been really challenging. So she really challenged my beliefs and maybe sort of stick to my word and go, okay, what are we going to do in this space? So, yeah. What are the main reasons you see as to why kids become picky eaters?
There are a lot of reasons. And you mentioned at the very beginning when you were recording that this is not necessarily a space or an episode specific for neurodivergent kids.
Yeah.
But it is worth noting that even children who are neurotypical can be selective eaters. And there is research to show that some of that is hereditable, meaning that you can inherit it from you as the parent.
Yes.
And at the moment, it's interesting. One of my clients earlier today, both the parents are actually quite picky eaters. Well, they call themselves picky eaters. I wouldn't call them that. I would say that they have strong preferences.
Yeah.
However, the point is that it's kind of like if you have heart disease that runs in your family, you're predisposed to it, but that doesn't mean you're going to get it.
Yeah.
And if you don't manage your risk factors properly, there's a much higher chance that it's going to be a problem in your life versus if you manage your risk factors well and you take it seriously, you're much less likely to go down that path, or you can definitely stave it off for a longer period of time. And in that same space, my second kid is more selective too.
Yeah.
And I used to joke, since she turned about 18 months old, I would say at meals with my ex-husband, I'd say, and this could be one of my clients, this child. It could be her.
Yeah.
Because she would happily have survived if we'd have allowed it. Yeah. She would have survived on buttered toast, cheese, and fruit.
Oh, that's Harlow. If she had her way, she would have cheese and fruit and some plain pasta. That would be her go-tos. And maybe some red onion, which I know is really weird, but like that would be her things. But I talk about the same thing when it comes to obesity. I say obesity isn't genetic, but habits are. Like if you have got those habits running through your family and then they're passed on, then you're more likely and susceptible to be predispositioned to that, right? So interesting. I've never thought about it in a picky eater way, so that's interesting.
To answer your question, what are some of the underlying reasons? I don't want anyone to listen to this podcast and say, oh, it's just genetic. Oh, can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
You can do things about that, I promise.
Yeah.
And interestingly, a reel that I posted yesterday has gotten like a lot of, like over 100 comments overnight. I opened the app this morning. And one of the things that a lot of people have said is, this is a Western problem. We've created this problem, which helps me answer this question.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of true, but also it's kind of not true. I had a few people commenting saying, well, you know, Westerners again, or, you know, wealthy people, you're entitled, you can make another meal. You have the option to do that.
Yeah.
And poor children or children growing up in a war zone are not picky. And there's something to be said 100% for the way we parent the children around food, the way we communicate around food, and how we parent around food. Yeah. So, and I'll give you an example of each. So an example of how we parent around food, being permissive and the child saying, I don't want to eat that, and the parent making another meal. That's a behavioral issue, and that's a parenting issue. That to me is permissive. You want to eat that? I'll make you the thing you want.
Yeah.
Versus something like communication, I talk a lot about on social media, is how do we talk to the child about the food?
Yes.
So if you're a parent who says, you have to try this food, you have to try a bite.
Yes.
That is pressuring the child to eat, and that is communication. If you praise your child when they eat something, oh, well done, you ate that, that's so good, you're such a good boy. Yeah. That's pressuring too. Could you imagine being out with your friends and you're the one who didn't want to try something, and then at the table all your friends are telling you to try it, and then when you try it, one of your friends is like, 3 cheers for Thalia, she tried the whatever it was, the snail, she did it. I'd be mortified.
Yeah, interesting. Because we always talk about that positive reinforcement, like when they eat something that's different on you, we should praise them because it's like showing them that that's a positive thing, right?
We want the positive to come from the child. We want the child to praise themselves. Yeah. It's not our job. It's not that it's wrong to praise. It's that almost always when a parent is praising their child for eating something, it's actually pressuring them.
Yeah, right. For example, this is actually interesting because now I'm like going back to like dinner times and things. Like, my Harley this morning finished her breakfast and she was like, Mummy, look. And so then I praise because she's like, look, I finished my breakfast. And so then I'm praising. That's different, right? Because she's then coming to me going, look what I've done.
This is something that I tell my private clients.
Yeah.
We want the child to be proud of themselves. If they tried something new, even if they're looking to you for praise, you can say, wow, I saw you try that. Are you proud of yourself for trying that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for example, the other day, my more selective eater, I made a pumpkin soup, which I had told them about early, and she had warned me she wasn't going to eat it.
Yeah.
And when I picked them up and I brought them home and I told them what we were having, I told them, okay, I've got 3 different ideas of things that you can mix into your soup.
Yeah.
And they were cinnamon, coconut, milk, or cream.
Yeah.
And you can mix all of them. You can mix one of them. You can mix none of them. Doesn't bother me. And they picked the thing that they wanted to mix in each kid. And the little one, the more selective one, did try it. And then she gave me her feedback, and we move away from saying things like, I don't like it, or this is yucky, or whatever. Like, that's a whole episode. That's a whole coaching session. Then the next day I said, this time we're going to do it where we're not going to add any of those things. The only thing we're adding is cheese. We're going to have it in its savory form because it did have some chicken stock in it. You can have it with cheese or you can have it just by itself. Yeah. And the next day I was shocked, actually. I was going to present it to her anyway on the side where she could try it if she wanted to or not. But she picked cheese and she did taste it with the cheese in it. And I just said, it's great that you tried it.
Yeah.
Are you proud of yourself for trying it? Because you did that. It's not about making me happy. Yeah. We don't want to get children caught up.
Yes. It's not about
mummy only loves me.
No.
When I try things.
Totally. That's absolutely, I agree. It's not about us. It's always about them, and yeah, for sure. So, okay, so we've got communication and parenting. So that's the main reasons you see as to why they become picky eaters.
I should address this. If there's an underlying neurodivergence. Yes. Because there are children who really will skip meals all day. Yeah. Even though they're hungry, just because it's not a food that they think that they can eat. Yeah. And if we're talking about a child that has RFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, which is a newly diagnosed eating disorder. Yeah. It's only been around for about 10 years. A lot of doctors don't know about it. Yeah. If you think your child has it, your doctor has no idea what it is, go to a different doctor, please. That being said, there are also some kids that I've worked with that are not diagnosed with anything, and they will also just skip meals.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So parenting does play a really big role in it. And then I don't want to discount any underlying, some children are more selective than others. Your daughter and my own daughter. That just means that we need to be much more purposeful about how we parent and communicate with them. Sure. Because like I said, she could have been the kid that only ate those 5 things.
Totally. Yeah.
If I hadn't had the tools to continue expanding and continue changing the way I communicated with her and encouraged without encouraging.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, nice. Yes. So, because I know, like, obviously parents find this stage of parenting very hard, which is a reason I also wrote my book, because I was like, I want to help parents in this stage, you know, even from someone who enjoys this stage. Even when I went into it, to be honest, every time I've gone into it, so with my first and the twins, and even when I'm currently pregnant, I'm always like, okay, like, I'm going to sound weird, but like, don't fuck it up. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is such a big part of their life. And, you know, I work with women now who have, you know, eating disorders and all these sorts of things because of their childhood. So I'm like, you know, we're setting our kids up for life. So I know parents already find it hard. And so this isn't passing blame, of course, but parents are basically responsible in this space most of the time, right?
Yes. I don't want to say it as in to blame anybody.
No, this is not a space of blame or like, but I think sometimes it's very easy, like we were talking about earlier, if people are in the space ready to open up and be like, yeah, you know what, I need to take some responsibility about what I've brought into the house. Am I offering second meals? Am I giving enough diversity of foods? Am I being, I call it like persistent and consistent with exposure, that sort of thing. So I think if parents can be open to going, yeah, you know what, I am responsible for this.
Yes, I want parents to take that and feel empowered by the fact that you can change your communication and you can change the foods that you're offering. You can change whether you're giving your child a lot of milk after they refuse a meal. You can change those things. You have, I call it positive power. Yeah. You have positive power. You run the show. It's your, like, and it's a scary place to be because it's not just food. It's also, how do we get their shoes on every morning? How do we make sure they brush their teeth? Are they showering? Like, it's, mealtimes is just one slice of this pie of parenting, and you have the power to make those changes. Yeah. So in that respect, yes, you have the power, you have the control. You just need the right tools and strategies to help you also feel confident. Because if you have no idea, like, okay, well, I don't want to make a second meal, so do I just make one meal and it doesn't have any reliable foods for my child? That's setting everybody up to fail. Yeah. So you need to have some basic understanding of how you can do that and set everybody up to be successful?
So for the parents out there, because I know this is a very common question, and I get it when I sort of talk about how I parent around food as well. So if my kids don't eat their dinner, they don't get any more dinner. Like, they go to bed hungry. I mean, I'm not saying hungry. I totally believe that sometimes you just don't want to eat. Like, we are basically dictating their meal times, whereas as an adult, you can choose when you eat because we make our own food. And, if my kids don't eat their lunch, they don't get a second lunch, they have to wait for the next snack time, or meal time. Should parents worry in this space? Like, is what I'm doing wrong, Talia? Like, should I, would you send your kids to bed hungry? And is that okay if we're literally fully out refusing? Like, Carly the other night would not eat chicken stew. Chris was like, she just does not like this, Danny. She's now 2.5 or 2 years, 8 months. She didn't complain or anything. She just toddled off to bed later. Yeah. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around this.
Okay, this covers a few different things. So one, it's really important to have a predictable, regular mealtime and snack time routine and schedule.
Yep.
It's one thing, sometimes I work with kids that are a little bit older and they've got karate one night and they've got swimming one night and they can't have a consistent dinner time at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock every night because they're doing different things. So that would be a different case where it might not be regular, but it's still consistent in that they're not getting snacks all day long.
Totally.
And we don't want kids to be getting snacks and milk all day long.
No.
That's a no-no.
Yeah.
So yes, what you're doing there is correct. And in sending kids to bed hungry, I want to pause and take a step back because for some parents, that's a really hard line.
Yeah.
Because it depends where your child is at. If you have a normal, healthy, thriving child and they're skipping dinner once a month, no big deal.
Cool.
No big deal. But I've also spoken to parents whose kids are doing this routinely 3 times a week, not eating dinner.
Yeah.
And sometimes not eating multiple meals during the day, including dinner.
Yeah.
That's a big red flag. So depending where you are as a parent when you're listening to this, if your child is skipping meals regularly, multiple times a week, it doesn't matter if it's lunch or dinner, because if they're skipping lunch, they're going from morning snack time of say 10 o'clock till afternoon snack at say 2:30, 3 o'clock, and they're awake for that time. Whereas when you're asleep, your body is able to break down the stored energy that you have to keep your blood glucose levels at a normal space. But if the child's awake and running around and doing things, that's a lot harder.
Yeah.
So it's not a good thing for them to be skipping meals anytime. But if they're regularly skipping meals, there's a reason why that's happening, and you need to address that.
Yeah.
Like my youngest one sometimes too, sometimes kids are more tired than they are hungry.
Yes.
And if they've had a huge day, even if they haven't had a huge day, they could be growing, they could be getting sick, they could be getting over an illness that they haven't fully been sick from.
Sure. Yeah.
There are many reasons that a kid may not eat.
Yeah.
But if it's happening regularly, you need to look into that because that's not normal.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So if it's once in a while,
advice.
My kid's gone to bed hungry, never said a word about it, next day she was totally fine and no issues. So sometimes that's okay. It's just if it's happening a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. I love that because, my kids are thriving and they do eat, and it's just every now and then. And like you said, all those things, getting over sickness, tired, just don't feel like eating. And if it's just because she doesn't like what she's given, I still then offer it again. It's always an offer again. But what I do try and do, so you might have some other tips in this space, is if I know she hasn't eaten, say, that dinner, I just make sure that the next meal I give her is that something I know she's going to eat that's nourishing.
I will say a couple of things. So with your child is happy and thriving. If you're a parent whose child is failing to thrive, not gaining enough weight, or they are an extreme picky eater, it is very scary when the child is not eating a meal. And that can, by spiking your anxiety, cause you to either make something else for them, which you do because you care about your child. It doesn't make you a bad parent for doing that.
Yeah.
It means you're a parent who cares. It's just, is that the right way to help them through what they're going through?
Yeah.
So taking a step back again with talking about how to make the child be successful is, if you know your child hates stew, not even that they hate it, they've never loved it. It's not their favorite thing.
Yeah.
Let's say that. If you're serving stew that night, like the pumpkin soup that I made the other night, right? If I had just served pumpkin soup, I'd be setting myself up for a shit show for myself and for the child. That's not okay.
Yeah.
It's your job as the parent to decide what is served. And part of what you decide is to be served, you need to have something that is reliable for them. Yeah. So I'm trying to think, what else did I have that night? I roasted some veggies to go alongside it. Yeah. And I also cooked up some salmon because I know salmon is reliable, and roasted veggies. I did pumpkin and potato as little potato chips. Yeah. We could do with tomato sauce. There's a few different reliable things there that even if she had only eaten the salmon and the veggies, fine. That's great. If she didn't eat the soup, not a big deal. But if I just have served her the soup, she might not want to come to the table. She might be like, I don't want to eat that.
Yeah.
Now she has no chance of trying it versus I've got these other things here that are really enjoyable too.
Yeah.
And, you know, you give them something to dip in the soup. There, like, you want to set yourself up to be successful.
Just did a podcast with Bailey, and she talked about how her son was a very picky eater when he was young, and she took full responsibility. She was like, basically, he liked chicken nugget, and then all he wanted was chicken nuggets. So I just started giving him chicken nuggets, and then that was literally all he would eat, like literally breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He was quite small, she said as well. So she was like, well, I just want him to eat, so I'm just going to get him to eat the chicken nuggets. And she said after a couple of years, she was like, I've done this. I've allowed this to happen. I've chosen what's come to the house. And she said it took about a year to turn that around, right? So if we're talking about, you know, picky eaters where we're making either multiple meals or the kids are only eating, like, you know, I've heard of kids just eating like white foods or not trying vegetables and those things. What are the adverse effects if we don't address this when they're kids?
Someone sent me a DM about that, actually. They said, oh, both myself and my husband are picky eaters. He doesn't seem to think it's a problem. We grew out of it when we were teenagers. Why should I do anything about this now?
Yes.
And it was a good question because she wanted me to convince her that she needs to take action.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I don't want to convince anybody of anything that they don't want to be convinced of.
Yeah.
The response that I gave her was, only you can decide if that's an important thing to you or not. To me, as somebody who works in this profession, it is important because if your child, let's say that this starts when usually it starts when they're like 18 months old, sometimes when they're 2, sometimes when they're 3, but it's usually earlier on than that.
Yeah.
If you've got a child who is from 18 months old to the age of 13, not eating an adequate variety of foods from all the food groups, that is a huge chunk of their development that they are not getting adequate nutrition.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
They're definitely missing out on micronutrients. They're not getting all the fiber they need.
Yeah.
There's no way they're getting, if they're eating chicken nuggets, they probably are getting iron. I don't know if they're getting enough iron, but they're not going to be getting all the vitamins and minerals that you get from eating a wide variety of food consistently over time. Yeah. And this is a period of growth and development where your child's brain is growing, their body is growing. And yes, a child can grow and develop without adequate nutrition. Do you want to be responsible for that though? If you can make a change. So that's one aspect, which is the more clinical aspect. And the more psychological aspect is, do you want to be catering for 13 years or 12 years of making separate meals and being stressed out all the time because your child isn't eating a single vegetable and worried? You're going to be scouring social media and online. How do I fix this? What do I do? You're going to be trying things constantly, which is mentally exhausting for you. And meal times are highly unpleasant. And if they're unpleasant for you, you can bet they're not pleasant for your child either. Your child knows if you're sitting there thinking like, chicken nuggets again for you, maybe you'll have some vegetables sometime. Like that builds a lot of resentment.
I see that comment a lot, and I think it's a lot of parents, obviously, I'd call it toxic empathy, like trying to be validated for their behavior, and they go, well, as long as they're eating. And I don't really agree with that statement. Like, no, as long as they're eating. Kids, adults, everyone, a variety of nutrients and micronutrients from all the food groups to thrive. And I think this is the thing. Yes, like you said, kids will grow and they'll develop fine without it, but they won't be the best version of themselves.
And I wanted to just tweak that. They may grow and develop fine. They may grow and develop.
Yes.
It may not be fine. It's like the parent who says, I smoked when I was pregnant and my child turned out fine. Well, okay. Have you checked their lung capacity? Yeah. What do the lung air sacs look like? What about the neurons that are wired in their brains during pregnancy? Yeah. The food, like there's a lot of research in this area now that the food that mothers eat when they're pregnant. And in fact, I'm not even putting this all on mothers. There's research that shows sperm quality is affected 6 months prior to conception based on your diet. This is getting a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I've read it.
I saw that research the other day, and I sent it to Chris, and I was like, and also, I know this is going off topic. Oh, my baby's moving. I haven't really felt it move before. Oh my God, sorry. About so I've had 4 miscarriages, and it was saying, ladies, like, please know that it's not necessarily always you. It could be also be the guy. So anyway, that's off topic, but it just goes to show that
there's adequate and there's optimal, and it's not possible to have optimal all the time. I don't want to ever call a parent lazy.
Yeah.
What I will say is it's very easy to just dismiss things. Yeah. It'll go away when they get older. It's just a season. Yeah. It's just this.
Yeah.
Okay. It might be those things, but what are some of the implications in the long term?
Yeah.
Like, for example, children that have ADHD, their requirements for certain nutrients are actually higher, and they tend to be deficient in those nutrients in their diet, and like omega-3s, a specific type of omega-3 that is one of those things. It's not a recommendation yet because there isn't enough evidence, but there is a strong body of evidence that shows possibly supplementing with this, but ultimately it's better if it comes from the diet, because it's also linked in. If you're eating fish, for example, you're getting a lean source of protein, whereas instead if your child's just eating chicken nuggets all day, but you're giving them a supplement, that doesn't counteract the problem of eating chicken nuggets all day.
Oh my God.
So it is
about something about this as well. Like, just because you give them a supplement doesn't outdo it doesn't counteract one of them, it doesn't counteract the other. From first taste to toddlers, Nourishing Little Lives isn't just a recipe book. It will be your Bible as you move through your food journey with your little one. It really is the book you need when it comes to what to feed your kids. Cooking the food is just one part of introducing solids and feeding our kids, and Nourishing Little Lives has advice and guidance around where to start, how to navigate allergens, routines, what to look out for in foods, as well as advice around ensuring your child is getting all the nutrients they need to conquer life. Helping them thrive is so important, and I love helping parents in this space. Grab your copy in the show notes and use code LIFEPOD for a massive 15% off, and happy cooking. Yeah.
Exactly. For parents who, like, I'm jumping a little bit all over the place for, like, what you said about at least they're eating. I've worked with a lot of parents who, I've worked with some kids that do have RFID, which is it's very extreme. It's an eating disorder.
Yeah.
And in those cases, things have to be so perfect. Like, the grape has to be perfectly round and green, but if the grape is slightly soft or slightly white or slightly brown, the child can't accept it.
Yeah.
And there are cases like that where it is important that a child does eat something because they literally won't eat anything else.
Yes.
If we're talking about a standard case of picky eating of a 2 or 3 year old who's just, it's mostly behavioral, in that situation, it's not really okay to just dismiss it as, no, they're eating, that's important. It is important that they eat.
Yeah.
It's like saying, oh, my child didn't die today.
Yeah.
Even though, like, I let them be outside in a hailstorm.
Totally.
That's not a good thing.
No.
That's not where the baseline should be.
And I think I love that. That's definitely not where the baseline is. And, as I said, I work with women in their adulthood that are coming to me because of things that, happened when they were children in regards to nutrition. It's like, I don't eat any veggies because mum and dad never did it, or we just ate frozen meat, or that's now coming into their adulthood. They don't want to be like that for whatever reason. They don't feel good. They've now got, type 2 diabetes. They've got eating disorders because they're not sure how to navigate food. So they're going on these yo-yo diets. And so I sort of see that end of it as well.
I worked with a fellow who was in his mid-20s who he had to do a lot of work on why he was afraid to try things, because his goal was to be able to eat out at a restaurant with his friends. He's like, I eat at home most of the time because I don't want to be a burden to the people that I go out with, because I don't want to eat certain things.
Yeah.
And he'd done a lot of work on himself, and a lot of it was just giving himself permission to not like things and not like them right away.
Yeah. And
building this curiosity, which is something that when we're communicating with the kids, again, if we're communicating, you must try this, well, that's not building any curiosity. Versus, I wonder if I tried a bite of this and this together, what would that taste like?
Yeah. Just changing that.
So
exactly what you said at the start, right? Like communication and parenting, which I love.
You've got a lot of power. Like, use the power. Don't say things like, I'll address it in 3 years' time, or I'll see if it's a problem in 6 years' time. Yeah. You're minimizing how much power you have over the situation.
Yeah. Gosh, we could talk forever. I've got so many more questions. We might have to do a second podcast. So what are your 5 tips you'd give parents who have a picky eater currently?
Identify that it's a problem. Yeah. Write down a list. I've got one video that's pinned to the top of my Instagram page at the moment about how to count your child's reliable foods. Yeah. Go and count them. Like, actually write them all down. Which ones will they reliably eat? And to get a bit of clarification, potatoes, if they're presented as mashed potatoes versus homemade potato fries, it's still a potato. I would write down that they are accepting potato in 5 different ways, or in 2 different ways, or in no different ways. Yeah. Because, like, a pumpkin soup, wildly different from the consistency of a roasted pumpkin. Write them both down. It's still pumpkin, but if someone like me was looking at it, I'd go, great, that kid's got a good variety of foods there. Yeah. Or, like, oh, great, like, that child can eat, they're happily eating 10 different vegetables. Yes. And they'll eat them in a few different ways. Like, that's really flexible. Yes. That's great. But if the child's only eating chicken nuggets, like, great, they're eating chicken, but will they also eat it as a schnitzel? Will they eat it when it's baked? Will they eat it when it's in a soup? Will they eat it in different ways? So write down a list of everything that your child eats and count them up, because 20 foods or less is considered a red flag.
Okay.
And also try to group them into the food groups, because if they're not eating a variety from each food group,
Yeah.
that's a red flag too. So do yourself a favor and write them all down. You might be surprised. They might actually eat more than you expect. But if they're not eating a variety, let's say you've got nothing in the vegetables category, but they're decently varying their diet in other ways, great, we'll just work on that.
Yes.
And anything that doesn't quite fit into a food group, that like a crinkly bag snack, like an oat bar or a chocolate muffin or something like that, even if it's a muffin that's got, black beans in it, great. That's a more nutritious kind of muffin. And I would say that casually fits into the legumes and meat alternative group, because we can work with that.
Yeah.
But if it's something like my kid eats just like chips out of the package, you can put that down as a type of potato that they're eating, but I wouldn't really count that towards a food group. It's helpful. If I was working with you, I would look at all the snack foods that your child's eating and I go, okay, how can we boost the nutrition in all of these things and help move them towards something in a food group?
Yeah.
So separate the crinkly bag snacks, still write them down, but separate them so that you can get really good clarity as to whether it's a problem or not. Because those are your two major red flags. And if meal times are super stressful, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
If you're preparing separate meals, red flag.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so
that's tip number one.
That's tip number one. One more tip. If you've currently got a eater, what would be one thing you would start doing today?
I would ask you to examine how you talk to your child at mealtimes.
Yeah.
And are you pressuring your child? And most pressure is not the overt type pressure, because I don't think I've really worked with any parents who on a discovery call when we first meet, a lot of times they tell me, I don't pressure my children to eat. And then I let them talk and I listen about what does a mealtime look like? What does it sound like? They will say things like, if you don't eat your vegetables, you're not going to grow up big and strong, or that has protein in it and you need to eat that so that you grow up and, get big and muscly or whatever. Yeah. That's pressure.
See, we do that a lot in our house, because obviously I'm very passionate about what food does for us and why we eat. So there's a lot of that talk in our house. And even like this morning I said to Harper, I was making her a sandwich for lunch and I was like, cool, talk to me about what is the bread dish? She's like, that's going to give me energy. I'm like, what's the avocado shake? It's good for my brain and my hormones. She was like helping me, because we talk about it like that all the time. So on for example, at dinner time, like if she's not that hungry, I'm like, you just have to have a little bit from each thing just so you're getting all your nutrients from each thing. She's like, okay. Because I never force them to eat everything on their plate, right? But yeah, we talk about that a lot. You're making me feel like, oh God, maybe I'm not doing this right.
There are things that are appropriate to talk about with kids, and it depends on the child's age as well.
Yeah.
So my oldest one just turned 8 and the little one is 5. And in the last couple of years, we'll have chats about what in here has fiber.
Yeah.
I want to focus on what things we want the kids to eat more of that are great.
Yeah.
So here's a tip. Here's the tip how to communicate with the kids about this. Try to focus on things. Don't ever say anything about sugar. That's tip number 700.
Yeah.
Don't demonize things. Don't point those sorts of things out. Point out the things that we want children to eat more of. What in this meal has fiber? Do you know where fiber comes from?
Yeah.
It comes from anything that comes from a plant. If it's a seed, a nut, a vegetable, a fruit, a grain comes from a plant, and it'll have fiber in it. Some things have more fiber than others. So, for example, the way that my ex-husband and I parent is very different around food. Yeah. And my daughter will ask me, can I have Crustkits? And I say, I don't really buy Crustkits very often. I usually buy the Vita Wheat, or I buy a few different ones. And I'll say, the reason for that is because it's made with whole wheat flour. Yeah. Crustkits also are made with flour. I try not to even say the words like processed, because those are highly charged words for us.
Yeah.
When those are being made, a lot of the parts of the plant are removed, which means there's not as much fiber in it.
Yeah.
Whereas something like the Vita Wheat, or, a different brand that is also whole wheat with grains in it, you can say that has a lot of fiber in it because everything is kept intact, or most of it is kept intact. Yeah. And when they add the seeds to it, that's also got fiber in it. So I like to focus on fiber and iron, because those are the things that kids, you can explain to them in a pretty cool way. Iron helps your body get oxygen. Yeah. And fiber helps you poop and helps you fart. Every kid loves to talk about that. Yeah. So trying to focus on those things rather than those minute specific nutrients, which most kids aren't going to give a shit about. Yeah. They're 5, they're 3, they're 2. They don't need to know about those things. It's not helpful to them to know those things. Yeah. And we don't want them to become hyper fixated on them. So tips 2 to 20, change the way you communicate and try to identify anything that could be pressure. And what you can do is when you're saying stuff at a mealtime, think about, how would I feel if my spouse said that to me? How would I receive that? Would I find that to be quite upsetting, that someone's telling me, you ate more green beans than that yesterday. How come you're not eating them today?
Yeah. Interesting. Oh my God, I feel like, we
wouldn't like it
on this. And give you one tip to a new parent listening, they're about to enter that world of solids. Give one tip to ensure that they don't end up a picky eater. What's your one tip?
It's going to be one tip, but 100 tips altogether.
Yeah.
Don't worry too much about the way you start solids, whether it's purees or baby-led weaning, because you can have a responsive relationship with your child, whether you're doing purees or baby-led weaning. That's tip number one.
Yeah.
But being responsive and focusing on the way you communicate with them. Even your 6-month-old, they might not understand everything that you say, but contextually, from your face, from your tone, they're picking up your language. Talking to them like a person is really helpful from when they're a baby. Yeah. I do actually have a course that I developed. This was my third course that I developed in the first year of counseling clients one-on-one, because a lot of the parents would say, God, I wish I knew this when my child was 7 months old or 12 months old. Yes. It would have made things so much easier. So I developed a course called Fuss-Free First Foods, which is for the first year of life. Yeah. And it's not just how do you do everything texturally appropriate. That's all covered too. How do you do allergies? That's all in there. But a lot of it is how do you communicate with your 6 to 12-month-old about having milk, about having solid food, about giving them sources of iron and how to do that safely, but also how to talk to the child about it, because that is really, really important. That'll set you up either for being the parent who is permissive and, I make you something else if you spit it out and whatever, versus, we can try that again tomorrow. Or, should we add some cinnamon to that? Yeah. So set yourself up to be successful right from the start by being equipped with how to handle those behaviors when they come up, because they do come up, like throwing comes up. How do we handle that? Yeah. We need to handle it.
Amazing. All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there this time, but I'd love to have you back. But before we go, do you want to let everyone know where they can find you and how they can work with you?
Okay. You can find me. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube at Family Snack Nutritionist, family.snack.nutritionist. But if you type it in, it should pop up. My website, you can get through all the socials, but I do have a free phrase guide. Yeah. I can send you the link to that, Danny.
The show notes, yeah.
Yeah, you can share that. I'll also send you the links to the online courses if anyone wants to take a look at them. But if you listen to the podcast and you're like, where to next? First off, go download the phrase guide, because that'll get you also on my email list. And I send out a lot of tools and tips and, also client wins to help you. Like, you're not the only one starting where you're starting at. And it is possible to see progress. So jump on my email list, and of course send me a private message on either Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. Yeah. I'm very responsive on there, and might take me a bit to get back to you, but I definitely will read it and get back to you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. There is just so much information to talk about in this subject, so we probably will have to come back and have another chat. But I really think people are going to walk away with at least some more understanding and having some more tools in their toolbox for dealing with what can be a very challenging subject.
It is very challenging. It's highly charged because we're parents, and it's important that the child eats. And a lot of food for us is tied up with, we love our child, so we need to feed them. And that's how we kind of get stuck in this, it's my job to feed them and they're not eating, so I feed them something else. So if you do want to reach out to me, let me know that you came from the podcast when you send me a DM, because I'd love to know where you came from, and we can chat more. But I would love to come back on, and there's a lot more that we can discuss. So I'm curious to hear feedback from today.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If something resonated with you, click follow so you don't miss the next episode, and send me a DM on Instagram at @thefigure_. It means the world to me to know that you're loving these episodes. If you're wanting more accountability and tools to implement changes in your life, head to the link in the show notes and book a free call with me. And if you want to get started right now, download our free resource, 5 simple things that will change your life. I can't wait to be back in your life next week, and trust me, you won't want to miss this episode.